Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Trish Sullivan. We started a little bit early tonight, and my apologies for that. However, we are here with our Salinas Chinatown book signing event with all well, a great many of the editor, Jean Benuga, and now Elise.
I just want to say right off that even though I thought I knew a lot about Chinatown when I started editing this book, I realized that there's so much more that I don't know about Chinatown. And one of the biggest things I think was, I mean, I knew that Chinatown was a multicultural kind of neighborhood, but I don't think I didn't really get it until I read the essays in this book. And while we know that the Chinese, of course, founded Chinatown, and the Filipinos had a big role in Chinatown also, I learned some things about African Americans and their role in Chinatown, especially in the mid-20th century, as well as Mexican residents and business owners. So it's just a really, the more that I read about it, the more I learn. It just, it's kind of very deep history. So I'm not going to read anything that I wrote this time. I want to get down to introducing some of the folks who contributed to the book. Make sure I didn't miss anything. When you check out the book, I also want you to check out the artists who contributed, because there is a growing group of artists in Chinatown. Some of them are in this book, but there are other artists who are starting to contribute. And Juan Carlos, for example, has a gallery in Chinatown, Urban Arts Collaborative, and he has some work in here also. So check that out when you get the book. And I think that I will, one other thing. I just want to say one other thing. So John Steinbeck, you know that guy? Yeah. So I like John Steinbeck. I've read a lot of his work. It's great. But he did kind of set the tone for what Chinatown is perceived. And, he was an outsider to Chinatown. So it's really great, I think, to have these stories from people who grew up in Chinatown. So I would like to introduce Kathy Chavez Miller. I'm going to ask the writers to please keep their readings to about 5 minutes because we're going to have a Q&A afterwards. And I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves. So, Kathy.
Good evening, everyone. So great to see everybody, and thank you, Jean, so much, and thank you for all your hard work and editing on this wonderful book. And so my little contribution here is Nissen Road to Chinatown. I have fond memories of going to my grandma's restaurant in Chinatown on Sunday. The El Faro restaurant was my grandmother, Virginia Ramirez Chavez's second restaurant in the early 1950s at 92 Soledad Street, 2 doors east of the Republic Cafe between the Lotus Inn and the residential Hotel Caminos. She worked 7 days a week. The shiny candy shelves and clean sidewalks full of four-doored soldiers in crisp olive uniforms surrounded the El Faro, her restaurant. Across the street, colorful brooms burst from the cardboard barrel in front of the Filipino grocery store. The green gold inn's huge mirrors captured my imagination. We played in the alleys of the inn. So I hope that you will enjoy picking up this book and finding out what happens next and what we did as kids and what we did as adults in Salinas Chinatown. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And next, Larry Hirahara.
Good evening. Thank you everybody for showing up. My name is Larry Hirahara. I've been working on the Chinatown project for about 20 years. But I'd like to, there's an oral interview and I had several interviews personally with Kay Endo Masatani. Their family had a business in Chinatown. The walk to Lincoln School seemed like a long way to young Kay. At that time, Japan had invaded China and the two countries were at war. Although Kay lived on Soledad Street in the heart of Chinatown, her parents did not allow her to associate with the Chinese. Likewise, the Chinese families did not encourage their children to associate with the Japanese. Kay, however, had a Chinese childhood friend named Helen Lowe. As they walked to school after they left Chinatown, they would associate and be friends until they returned to Chinatown. Then they would separate at California and Market Streets and arrive at their homes on different routes. In her post-war experience, there was no place for her to stay since the family business was from before the war were now rented property. Returning was a terrible experience for Kay. She had become a schoolgirl. Like a nanny, she cooked, cleaned, and took care of their family's children. She stayed with the Skonbergs and Lamar of Lamar Tyre's family. She was also attending Salinas High. She experienced discrimination at that time, and only 6 or 7 Asian girls would associate with her, including Filipinas. But she graduated and later completed business school. One of the families at the house she stayed at had their own friends that would often visit. These friends were from a family affected by the Bataan Death March. When this family visited, Kay was told to hide in the back room and not to come out. Despite the discrimination, Kay said that living with the white family was a good experience because it showed her a lifestyle she would have never been exposed to. Thank you.
And next, the historian who has also had a big impact on Chinatown and previous chair of ACE, Wellington Lee.
Hello, thank you. This book is like tip of the iceberg. I mean, there are lots of stories. I was born and raised in Salinas Chinatown 78 years ago. And I would hope, I came back home from San Francisco to write a book, and I'm still working on it. and I think I better hurry up. But anyway, I wanted to read one paragraph when I was interviewed, and the question was, what do you remember most fondly about Chinatown? Well, there was so many things. There was so many things, but here goes. Living in a very old but handy storefront house where various rooms upstairs and downstairs had distinctive smells and uses. Having friendly encounters with Chinese gentlemen bachelors and other ethnically diverse men and women who patronized the various bars, cafes, and brew halls on Soledad Street. Waking up to Mexican love songs, as well as rock and roll, rhythm and blues songs blaring out of loudspeakers on weekends. And also on those weekend evenings when I and some of my siblings happened to be walking home and had to weave past the foiled soldiers, luceros, and Filipino farm workers looking for fun and relaxation up and down Soledad Street. And I just wanted to also to just add one more thing. It's whenever the trains arrived on the tracks that crossed Soledad and East Market Street, the roar of their engines seemed to shake up our wooden house every time. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Wellington. Thanks, Wellington. I'm actually going to change the lineup a little bit because I know that Jill needs to get home. So I'm going to ask Jill Allen to read right now. What you need? 10, can I borrow? Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Buster is a very sweet soul, black man, slight, wiry, with me, always a smile and an offer to help. Always a trick phrase, something to make me smile, usually something with an old African-American slang expression like I only knew through the movies. With great regularity and without being asked, he emptied the trash in our offices upstairs at Dorothy's place. So get the picture here. Mature, black man, collecting garbage. Electing to do this on his own. He's the only person that did this. When he wasn't around, we were knee-deep in trash upstairs. One of my first projects in Soledad was to attempt to install a public restroom on the street. I recruited 4 college students to roam the neighborhood and administer a survey to the local businesses about restroom needs. They were also to take photos of the places where street people were forced to toilet. To do all of this, they needed a streetwise escort, Buster. I thought Buster was a good choice, but I found he wasn't the public's choice. The students reported to me that most of the local business owners wouldn't let him on the premises. I didn't ask why. Recently, I needed to get some work done on my car at the shop, maybe half a mile away. I needed to walk from the office to the shop to pick up the car. Nice stroll through a spent neighborhood that wouldn't normally be much of a strain, but I had my briefcase with me, a 15-pound shoulder bag that contained my antiquated laptop, books, and more paper than anyone should carry around. That afternoon, I shouldered the bag,
and took up on foot for the shop. As I was leaving, Buster noticed me walking, which he thought unusual, so he asked why. I explained that I needed to retrieve the car. In a moment of great sweetness, he expressed concern for me walking alone, and that I had to walk all that way with the briefcase. I told him not to worry, it was just a nice stretch of the legs. We said goodbye, and I was on my way. I hadn't made it down half a block when I heard his voice. He was running to catch up with me. He insisted on escorting me to the auto shop and carrying my briefcase. I protested, but he wouldn't have anything of it. He was coming with me. As we walked, I chatted, but noticed he wasn't responding with his usual enthusiasm. I kept talking, then ended with a question. He didn't answer. And then I noticed that his chest was heaving and he was slowing down. We approached a bus stop just in time. He carefully set down my briefcase on the bench and nearly passed out. After a minute, in which I was scared almost to the point of calling an ambulance, he recovered. Buster has emphysema. He literally risked his life to carry my briefcase. After he rested, we walked the rest of the way together, each carrying the briefcase in turns. I gave him a ride back to Dorothy's, and life went on. But not as before, at least not for me. I got to walk in the presence of greatness for just a while, and I can't forget that.
Thanks so much, Joe. And next, I would like to say happy birthday to Linda Wunlow. Yeah, she was born in Salinas today, September 1st. So she was almost 3.
Thank you. Yes, I was born here, and I decided to celebrate my birthday here today.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like good coming home because when I lived here, I went to LSL High and Carmel, and then I left. And when I was here, I really didn't appreciate Salinas. I guess it was being born to an immigrant family, lots of hard work, and it was a big family. But just coming full circle, I'm happy to be here. So I'm going to read a little bit about my dad's restaurant, Canton Lo. Canton Lo in Salinas, California. My dad and his partner's restaurant was on 26 Soledad Street in Salinas, Chinatown. I remember going to Canton Lo as a little girl when I was 7 years old. I would climb the tall stool near the cash register and reach high for the candy and gum that was sold there. Afterwards, it was my sister's turn. I can't even remember a time when my dad bought me candy or gum. So the few times I was in Canton Lo, it was a treat. And then it goes into talk a little bit about the restaurant. And then when the restaurant was sold, our home was, we had like, after it closed, a big round table. Graced the home with numerous pots and pans, dishes, and household items showed up. And Dad's prized possession was the chopping board and cleaver. He cooked for the family and retired from the restaurant business for good in the 1950s. At the end, you can read the rest of the story, but I said at the end, I went to Chinese school as a kid, and we went like 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 5 to 8. We played a lot too. So I was a good, like, I learned ping pong and, played on the monkey bars and just had a good time in learning Chinese, which I didn't really appreciate until I appreciate right now. But having a Chinatown in Salinas, I learned the value of family, heritage, and of knowing one's culture and language. My parents instilled it in us, these important values as we were growing up in my formative years. To this day, The Salinas Confucius Church is a vital part of the Chinese community. Sad to say that due to neglect and the times, Chinatown is no longer in existence. Many Chinese now go to San Francisco, San Jose, or Oakland to purchase Chinese groceries and goods and enjoy dim sum, a favorite time for families to gather. Although there is no longer a Chinatown, I still have sweet memories of my dad's restaurant, Canton Low, at 26 Soledad Street in Salinas, California. Salinas Chinatown. So I just want to end with my parents forced me to speak Chinese, Cantonese. So I had to go to school and learn it. And I subsequently became a teacher, and I had a bilingual class in Los Angeles, Chinatown. So that took me to a different Chinatown. And then come full circle, I came back to Oakland and taught in Oakland School District as well. So I used my language. And right now with my grandchildren, they're learning Mandarin. So I'm learning Mandarin on Duolingo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I see we have more books here, just to let you know. Thank you, Linda. Next up, I'd like to welcome Al Baggio. Al is on the ACE board and also a historian.
My name is Al Baggio. I was born and raised in Salinas. Just to show how old I am, the total population of Salinas was only a little over 4,000. So rather than read the entire text of the story that I wrote, I just want to read a couple of paragraphs, which is I thought was pertinent. During the early 1920s, Filipino immigration into the United States increased by 900%. 45,000 Filipinos had entered the United States. Out of that number, 67% lived in California. One glaring factor for the increase of Filipino immigration was the passage of the Japanese Exclusionary Act in 1924. California farmers had depended on Japanese labor and had to look to the Philippines and Mexico as a new source of cheap labor. Due to the heavy influx of Filipino immigrants, certain segments of the white society became xenophobic, which led to labor unrest and race riots during the late 1920s and 1930s. Because of the sensitive social situation, Filipinos congregate and socialize and develop businesses in the Salinas Chinatown area. During the decades of the 1930s through the 1960s, Filipinos owned or managed several businesses in Chinatown. One was the PI Market, which was located on Soledad Street, right across from the Republic Cafe. A restaurant called Loretta's Cafe was owned by Magdalena Reganai. She named the restaurant after her only daughter. The cafe was also located on Soledad Street across from the Lotus Inn Bar and next to Atai's Shell gas station. There was also another Filipino grocery store called Valley Market on the corner of Market and California Streets, owned by the Molinas family. The Filipino Congregational Church was also located on California Street. The original building is still standing, but is under a different religious denomination. Filipinos went to Chinatown to gamble. Chinese had a gambling concession. They offered the game of chance that the Filipinos called loteria, and it was preferred. It was the game that the Filipinos preferred. It is now called Keno. I believe if it weren't for the Filipinos, and the Chinese gambling would have gone out of business during that time. Filipinos were lucky enough to win any money, also bought dinner for their family and friends at the Republic Cafe. For the Filipinos, the Republic Cafe was the the restaurant. The service was great and the food was outstanding. Most Filipinos patronize the Chinatown area businesses mainly because of their strong bond with the Asian community. Chinatown was a special place, a haven for Filipinos at that time. The Republic Cafe was a very great restaurant. The food was great. And my dad always had a conversation with Chef Lee. There was a standing joke that he always had. He always counted the cats to see that there weren't any cats missing, and it was put on the food. But I was born and raised in Salinas. I graduated from spring school. I'm located on Hitchcock Road. Went to Salinas High School, which was the only high school in town. I went to Hartnell for 1 semester, got drafted, was stationed in Germany for almost 18 months. And then I finished my education at Hartnell College, got my degree at San Jose State University, and got my master's at Florida State University. I just want to tell everybody that Chinatown was a very special place. I hope that it will be resurrected like it was before. Thank you.
Just letting you know, one of the cooks from the Republic Cafe is here tonight, so he can have his say too. But before that, I'd like to welcome Tanya Mashina, who actually will talk a little bit more about the Republic.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Mashina. I grew up in Salinas, graduated from Alisal High. So my story is in page 77. It's a story of our visit to Republic Cafe back in the late 70s. My parents were in the flower business and we would go there because they didn't have time to cook. So I'm gonna read a little excerpt from that. What I remember about eating at the Republic Cafe was that we always went into the restaurant from the back door. We would park at the Buddhist temple parking lot right behind the cafe. Back then, the part of the temple grounds was just an open area with a fence separating it from the restaurant. Going into the restaurant from the back door was not a pleasant experience. We had to walk through the kitchen, which I recall was dripping with oil everywhere. There were many large woks, all black with many years of cooking. Various animals were hanging from the racks, like whole pig and ducks. I used to try not to look too much around the surrounding as I was afraid it would ruin my appetite. We went through the kitchen very quickly, but we usually went in very hungry too. Our parents took this path into the restaurant because on the front side on Soledad Street was very seedy. Prostitutes walked the street at night, and there were other unsavory characters that our parents didn't want us to see. So anyway, I'll stop here, but what I wanted to say is that Republic Cafe had really excellent food. And one of my favorite was char siu, pork. And after I went through high school, I went to Stanford and worked in Silicon Valley for many, many years. And I worked in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, China. I've been to all of those places, spent quite a bit of time. And I can tell you, I went to some of the finest restaurants. And I tell you, the char siu at Republic Cafe couldn't be beat. I finish off my story by telling this adage that I tell all my friends and workers whenever I visited these restaurants. When you go to Chinese restaurant, never look in their kitchen. Just enjoy the food. That's it.
Thank you, Tom. Tom is also the president of the Salinas Buddhist Temple. And now, I'd like to welcome Albert Fong, who can talk about his firsthand experience of working in the public cafe, among other things.
I want to thank Jean for doing the editing of this book and everyone that contributed, and everyone that made this happen. It's interesting because when Jean was putting out about doing this little story, and I was kind of reluctant because I didn't go to school to write. I mean, I went to Berkeley as a scientist. So anyway, I said, this is not going to be good. So, but anyway, she was persistent and kind to offer this. So I said, okay, I'll get on my computer. One day, just before she was going to do all this editing, I typed it in about 10, 15 minutes. So my story is pretty general and straightforward, and it'll give you an introduction. And for you that don't know me, I'm Albert Fong, and I'll tell you my story. And I'm on start at page 47, and my title was My Chinatown Story. Then I'll read it. It's brief. So anyway, my Chinatown story begins before the 1920s when my father, Frank Fong, at the age of 19, immigrated to the United States to live with his uncle and cousins in Salinas. He went back to China and married my mom in 1925. On returning to the United States, he had an opportunity to work on a ranch as a cook. He worked for the Hanson Ranch until his retirement. My siblings and I lived on the ranch and later lived in town because we had to go to school in the early 50s. Some of my cousins continued to live in Chinatown until the late 60s. My Fong family owned the Perla Inn, which was right next door to the public cafe. I remember they lived next door and where the Bakery Mission is now on Soledad Street. As kids, we looked forward to walking to town with my dad when he came from the ranch, which was mostly only once a year. We would enjoy a family outing and watch the Kumadal parade and the carnival around Chinatown area. During the year, there were many Chinese community events that we participated in. The Chinese New Year celebration was paramount. Whether it be dancing phoenix or dragons and fireworks popping, we watched mostly Chinese classic movies, enjoyed dim sum, refreshments, and many Chinese children's games. And there was a double tent celebration, was the autumn festival. They called Children's Day. And then there was Christmas programs, all with movies and refreshments, and we had fun. At age 13, I was asked to help my cousin, Tony, and his Chinese name was Tom, at the restaurant. In the book, it says Fong's Restaurant, but it's actually the Republic Cafe, where he worked and partnered with the Altai family. I was a busboy, then dishwasher, then helped prepare foods, and later helped to cook some of the dishes for the patrons. I worked part-time at Republic Cafe on Soledad Street until I moved away to go to college in 1971. During my time, the restaurant hosted many banquet dinners, especially during the Chinese New Year, for especially the two associations on Chinatown, the Su Sing Tong and the Bing Gong Tong. I helped with preparing 3 to 4 banquets a day. I nearly died because the preparation began on Thursday and the cleanup continued until Monday morning. It was rough working and going to school at the same time. I remember the outside other properties like the Shell gas station on the southwest end of Chinatown. I remember going into the vacant, abandoned Marion's Club next to the Lotus Inn bar in the 50s and 60s. I remember the Green Gold Motel and the little grocery store below with the bars and the pool and card rooms. I remember Leon's Club and Lord Luther's at the end of Chinatown. There was also the Golden Aster restaurant across from the Bing Gong Tong. Oh yes, I remember the old Chinese man Li who raised pigeons to sell for eating. The Republic Cafe had the best and most authentic Chinese food in the area, comparable to the Chinese food in San Francisco Chinatown, as you heard from other authors. I remember that the ingredients were the best because I was often preparing them. We used the best quality of fresh meats and vegetables to prepare the foods on the menu. The customers really enjoyed eating there. I shared my process of preparing sweet and sour chicken on YouTube a couple of years ago. thanks to my friend Dominic Dursa, he was here. And I look forward to sharing more Chinatown story in the future. Thank you. And Chinese, one of the important things that we want to wish everyone to have good health and happiness. And because I grew up in America and born here, as an American, we want to wish that God blesses everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Finally, our last reader tonight is Alex Fabros. Alex, do you want to read from there, or can you come up here?
No, I got it. I got it.
You got it?
You got
It's all done. It's my fault.
Alex is an amazing historian and ship's captain.
Yeah. My wife made me give up my cell phone. Okay. Imagine a boy that's about 3 years old, barely here in America. I didn't know much about what's going on. So here I was on a Saturday morning. But yeah, I was on a midweek morning getting my hair cut. And there it was. The sound I later learned was a California wagon, an air organ mounted on a wagon drawn by 4 huge horses, blasting a tune that announced that the circus was back in town. At my age. Following the wagon were street sweepers. And then there was an assortment of people walking behind the California tall ones, the short ones, little people, a lot of clowns. On trucks were people who represented the type of acts they would perform later that afternoon and night. And an entire assortment of circus wagons drawn by horses, followed carrying lions and tigers, and the camels, elephants, and other animals. Needless to say, I jumped out of the chair, pressed my face against the window to get a better look. After the parade passed, I ran out of the barber shop with the bib still around my neck. I followed the parade as far as possible before my father caught up. Thank you. And I was a college dropout, okay? But later in life, you get straightened up and you go back to school, become an officer, become a professor, appear on television, whether you like it or not. But the reference to a ship's captain is my wife bought me a sailboat. And that permitted me to sail almost anywhere I wanted beyond my imagination. Thank
Thank you, Alex. We're going to have a little Q&A. If so, you know, I know some of you may need to leave, but if some of you want to stick around to answer questions.
Maybe all the readers should be here.
So anybody who read, would you like to come back here? And,
We could take a picture too before.
okay,
Yeah, get the back.
let's get some folks here. Robert,
Get in the back over there.
are you okay to stand?
Yes.
You can, oh, that's kind of hard.
Don't
Linda?
Yeah.
Well, anybody else who feels like,
Get in the middle.
okay.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Let me take a picture first.
you better have some questions. Okay,
Tom and Larry,
okay, Alma's gonna take a quick.
just take another picture.
Date prisa.
One more.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Elmer. So, yeah, here we are. Yeah, any questions about the book or, the making of the book or Chinatown?
I have a, it's not really a question, but it's more like a comment. And I just really want to appreciate all of you here right now, sharing your story. And I'm a visual interdisciplinary artist in a house in Chinatown. I grew up in Salinas and I stayed here as a professional artist. And I've been talking to Jen about raising more awareness about the Chinatown, about the Japanese temple and everything that happened. But I also want to offer my support for you to also use Urban Arts Collaborative Studio so you can do these readings, because I think like young people and people need to hear these stories, and I think you will impact more when the other people, with other young people, can listen to the stories that you were just sharing today. They are very impactful and it will help us a lot.
Thank you.
Good idea. Thank you.
If you've seen Urban Arts Collaborative, it's really a beautiful space, and they have great shows there. So, when you can, get down there and see the shows, and maybe we can do a reading there. So, yes.
When did the Japanese residents leave the Lake Street area? I know the Chinese were there all the way until the 1960s and 70s, but when did the last of the Japanese residents leave the Lake Street area? In actual residents, obviously they might still have parcels.
Yeah, that was probably,
but when did they actually leave?
On California Street, we had quite a few Japanese. They were probably post-war, probably till the late 50s. And California, on Lake Street itself, depending if they had a place to come back to, not many people returned after the war. So there was not very many opportunities. So I say post-war, 1945, the vast majority of the Japanese did not return. There was 300 families in the Buddhist temple, and the recollection is there was like 15 or 20 families that returned after the war. So they wouldn't, they didn't vacate the area, they didn't return.
Okay.
There was also Japanese businesses. The Sundi family had a garage on California Street. And there was a bar and timber shop owned by Cave, who was a Japanese gentleman.
Okay.
Alex, did you want to say?
Actually, the major migration for everyone was post 1965, when they ruled that those covenants that said that we can't live in those houses, that we can't buy those houses, was ruled unconstitutional.
There was a barber shop owned by Lord Urabi on California Street also.
Thanks, Alex, and everybody. I also want to say that another thing that I learned when I was editing this book is how strong the Japanese presence was in Salinas Chinatown before World War II. That's another thing that I didn't quite get, how many businesses there were, how thriving it was, and how much they contributed to just the whole economy of Salinas Chinatown. So that really hit me when I was editing this book. Any other questions?
Just a footnote so that everybody know that there was a black baseball team called the Golden Dragons located on Soledad and Lake Street. It was on the corner of California and Lake Street. And there was also a shoe shine stand owned by Joe Butte, who was African American. Just a footnote to let everybody know that Chinatown was multicultural.
Yeah, and also check out Aretha Thompson's essay. That's another thing I learned about Lord Luther's. So go on YouTube and look up Lord Luther and the Three Deuces. The Three Deuces, fantastic music, and it was coming out of Chinatown. Any other questions?